Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Yo antaha pravishya mama vacha imam prashuptam sanjeevayati akila shakti daraswadamnam अन्यांष्टहस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यम् लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथा भूतं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So, good evening, good morning, and good afternoon. We are doing the third session on Isha Upanishad today. So, quite a lot of ground to cover. So, where are we? So, we got 18 verses, as you know, in Isha Upanishad. So, last week, we spent quite a lot of time talking about Om Ishavasyam Idang Sarvam Yatkincha Jagatyam Jagat. So that's the one line that we spent in some great detail. So before we make pravesha into the second half of the first verse and the second verse, let's think about the Rishi, Svayambu, Manu, Dadichi, Yagnavalkya, Kanva Rishi, and all the acharyas who have given us the commentaries on Isha Upanishad. The Devata, as you know, is Yagna Paramatma, and the Chandas predominantly for Ishavasya is Anushtup Chandas and Trishtub Chandas. So with that in mind, let's go into a brief recap of what we did last time. So Ishavasyam Idang Sarvam. So we understood that this word Ishavasyam could be split into either Ishavasyam or Isha Avasyam. So when you look at Isha as a word in its own right, Isha means Samarthya, Aishwarya, Sarva Samarthya, Achintya Aishwarya Shakti. So those are all the ideas of Isha. So that gives an idea of the omnipotency of the Supreme Being. Then when we look at Isha Vasyam. So what is the etymology of Vasyam? Vasa Avachedane, that which envelops. That which envelops is called Vasyam. So that which envelops the universe. So what that means is that which is transcendental. This being is transcendental. So that is the next meaning of Ishavasyam. But when I take Isha Avasyam, and when we looked at this verse in Bhagavatam 8:1-10, where it talks about Atma Avasyam Idang Sarvam. So that is what Bhagavatam talks about, that incident between Svayambu, Manu and Yagnanamaka Paramatma. So there it becomes Avasyam. Avasyam means that which is, so this universe is an abode of the Supreme Lord, which means that this Supreme Person is pervaded his creation, so it's immanence. So we understand by these three words, Isha Vasyam, we understand the great qualities of the Supreme Being, his omnipotency, his transcendence, and his immanence. And these are very important concepts for Sanatana Dharma, because as you know, the very second sutra of Badanayana is what? Om Janmadhyasya Yataha. Okay, he who is the creator of this universe. So if this Supreme Being is the creator, etc. of the universe, then we understand he is not only omnipotent, he is omniscient, but also he enters into all his creation and he is transcendent. Okay. Look at another important sutra of Veda Vyasa, Sarvatra Prasiddha Upadeshat. So that also is a very important sutra of Veda Vyasa, which also celebrates the all-pervasive nature of the Supreme Being. Look at the fourth Adhyaya. There is another very, very important sutra Badarayana called Jagat Vyaparavarjam. Okay. So these two sutras, Janmadhyasya Yataha and Jagat Vyaparavarjam, these are two critical sutras that talk about the greatness of the Supreme and how he not only creates, but all the transactions of the universe are under his control. Jagat Vyaparavarjam. Okay, so this is a very, very important sutra of Badarayana. So when we look at these ideas of Isha Upanishad, we clearly understand what Acharya has told us in Tattva Sankhya, where he said, Swatantram aswatantram cha dvividam tattvam ishyate swatantro Bhagavan Vishnu. So that categorical statement of Acharya then establishes what Shvetashvatara Upanishad has told us before, right? Nya agnyau dvavanishau kshara atmano ishate deva ekaha. Very, very clear statements that the kshara and the atman's controller is this deva who is only one. Or this eka also means esha eva karoti iti ekaha. He who does all the creation of the universe and etc. He is also called ekaha. Okay, so we understood not only this Brahmanda, but also our Pindanda, which has been described in our Shastras as a chariot of 5 horses, or a body with 9 doors or gates, or the body of 11 gates as Yama describes it to Nachiketa. So all these comprises our Pindanda. So when we understand this, we understand this Isha has pervaded not only Brahmanda but also Pindanda. He pervades them, gives them their reality. It gives them their objecthood of knowledge, and it also gives them their volition, okay, and sense of purpose. That's what Taittiriya Upanishad has told us. So that is the primary role of Brahman in this whole existence. So if Brahman brings everything into creation, and if Brahman owns this universe, and if this Brahman controls it, and if the controls not only the universe, if Brahman also controls the jiva, and everything is dependent on Brahman, then the obvious logical conclusion is, how can we claim ownership of anything? Okay, so this is a fundamental philosophy that Svayambu Manu is thinking about. Remember, we should never forget the prakarana of Ishavasya Upanishad. What is the contextual relevance of Ishavasya Upanishad? The contextual relevance is Svayambu Manu is being attacked by the Asuras, and he goes and prays to Yagnanamaka Paramatma. The first 3 mantras of Isha Upanishad tells us about the spirit in which he is praying. So this is self-prayer that Svayambu Manu is doing, and he's thinking about the Supreme Lord. Who is he? Ishavasyam idang sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat. So therefore, tena tyaktena bunjitaha ma gridaha kasya sviddanam. So this is the new verse, new line for today. So this is the second half of the first verse. Tena tyaktena bunjitaha ma gridaha kasya sviddanam. So in the first verse, Swayambhuva Manu has actually been thinking about the greatness, how this Brahman is the all-controller of everything and owner of everything. So by that Lord, so because he owns everything, by that Lord, Tena, Tyaktena means Dattena means what he gives, whatever he gives, okay. By that Lord, by his supreme ownership and control, whatever he gives, tena tyaktena bunjitaham. So bunjitaha opens up in 2 different ways. One aspect is accept, enjoy whatever he gives, or accept whatever he gives. Okay. Ma gridaha. So these are all easy verses. Ma gridaha. Gridaha means don't be greedy, asking for more and more and more, which is what we are all doing. Okay. But Swayambhu Manu, think about it. This is Swayambhu Manu doing this prayer. Swayambhu Manu is the Lord of the Manvantara. Okay. He is the owner of the Manvantara, operating under the control of the Supreme. And he says, God has given me this Manvantara to look after. Whatever he gives me, I will accept it and I will enjoy it. I will look after it. I'm not going to ask for anything more, and I'm just going to be looking after what this Lord has given to me. So, ma gridaha, do not covet or earn to possess or beg or not to be greedy. So, those are all the ideas that come from this particular verse, ma gridaha. Okay, so look at the bunjitaha before. So, tena tyaktena bunjitaha ma gridaha. So very logical way of looking at it. So as you know, when we do Upanishad Chintana, when we are doing Ishavasya Upanishad, we should also think about other Upanishads, what are they saying, and then try to do the comparative analysis. And what I have done today here is I've given you this incidence between Nachiketa and Yama. If you remember our Katha Upanishad, where around when Nachiketa asked, may I have the third boon? May I know about this Paramatma? May I know about the Moksha Sthiti and so on? Yama at that point said, Nachiketa, why do you want to ask those bigger questions? Why do you want to do this? Here, I'll give you all the wealth. I will give you the kingdom. I will make you the Maharaj. I will make you the Chakravarti. I will give you, hundreds and thousands of years. I'll give you all the wealth. Here is all the wealth. You can have all the singers to dance for you and dancers to dance for you. I'll give you all the wealth of this Manvantara. I'll give you all the wealth of the universe. Why do you want to ask this big question? Okay. So what did our Nachiketa say at that time? This is very, very important because this feeds into this verse. What did he say? Na vittena tarpaniyo manushye lapsyamahe vittam adraksham chetva Jivishyamo yavad jivishyasi tvam varastume varaniyaha sa eva. So Yama, Nachiketa at that time reminded Yama, what am I going to do with all this wealth? Okay, I don't own anything. I don't own any of the wealth. You are giving me all this wealth. So what is the use? Because whatever wealth you give, I'm never going to be satiated by this. Okay, so that is another idea also when he says bunjitaha, tena tyaktena bunjitaha means be content with what he gives. Nachiketa reminds us the nature of the human beings is they are never content with whatever material wealth that they have. Okay, so these are all the ideas that come from the second line, which is a natural consequence of the first line of the first mantra. When the Supreme Lord owns everything, what is it that we own? We actually own nothing. Yeah, and whatever he gives, let us just accept and be content with what we have. And we got this sadhana sharira to make progress. So let us use this sadhana sharira in feeding the soul rather than feeding this body. Okay, so that is a key message that Svayambu Manu is doing. So when this tena tyaktena bunjitaha magridaha kasyas vidhanam, I was just thinking about this. When wherever we are living at this point, some of us live in England, some of you in US, some in India and Dubai and other places. How are we running our lives? We all have bank accounts. And of course, in your country, there is the Bank of England. There is the High Street Bank. We have individual bank accounts. Some companies have business accounts. Where do all these come from? Your country will have the gold bullion. They will make paper currency. They make metal coins. Where does the gold bullion come from? Where does the gold come from? It comes from earth. Where does the paper currency come from? It comes from the trees. Where do the metal coins come from? It comes from earth. Where does earth come from? Where do the trees come from? Did we make the trees? Did we make the earth? No, we didn't make anything because everything is Ishavasyam idam sarvam. So that is how I see it. So you think about cryptocurrencies, stocks, shares, bonds, cryptocurrencies, credit cards, debit cards, digital payments, what have you. Everything is one big myth. When you look at the great philosophy of what Svayambu Manu is telling us, he is telling us you can have whatever arrangement that you want to satisfy your body. But ultimately, everything belongs to Ishavasyam idam sarvam. We do not carry any of these when we die. Fundamental position. So the very first verse is almost like a shock for us when we read it. So it might sound like just two verses, but the amount of philosophy that has been packaged into it actually gives us a lot of lessons in our own lives. Some of us are halfway through our lives. Some of them may be a lot younger. So we don't think about these problems, but we are all stuck with our own financial issues and crises of daily existence. But when you think about the core philosophy of Isha Upanishad and also what our Rishis are thinking about, it gives you an entirely different perspective. So I'm very, very keen to bring us into this prakarana of this Isha Upanishad. We should never forget the contextual relevance, and I can't stress this enough. Let us not pick philosophies and have a discussion. We have to talk about what is that conversation or what is that prayer that Svayambu Manu is doing. So what is Svayambu Manu doing? God is the creator of this universe. God has given this Manvantara to me to protect. I should protect and look after it. But I cannot do it independently because he is the owner of everything. God is the supreme controller. So he is paying Yagnanamaka Paramatma, please use me as a medium and get the job done, whatever it is that you desire. Okay, so this is the prayer that Swayambhu Manu is praying to Yagnanamaka Paramatma. And like what we have done before in Katha Upanishad, we should also get into the Swayambhu Manu's shoes. Otherwise, Isha Upanishad is not going to be of any use to us. We have to get into Swayambhu Manu's shoes and put ourselves in his shoes. What is Swayambhu Manu's position? He is in the forest, the Asuras are attacking him. Where are we? We are in this forest called the Samsara, where all the desires are attacking us. So we should also try and approach this problem exactly as how Swayambhu Manu is doing. So if God is an independent doer, do I do any actions at all? Is the next logical question. If he is the independent person who is doing all actions, then there is a higher level philosophy that comes in. And hopefully I'll be able to deal with this for the rest of this class. There's quite a few slides to navigate. So the question there is, if God is the independent doer of everything, do I as a jiva do any action at all? Why do I get karmic reactions when the God is the independent doer? Why should I get karma? He should get karmic imprints. Why am I getting the karmic imprints? Even more fundamental question, what is karma at all in the first place? Do we actually think about what is karma? We are very, we colloquially use the word karma in our day-to-day, conversations. But do we need to go to the core philosophy of what is it what karma is that the Sanatana Dharma is talking about? What is its role in the journey of souls? In what spirit Swayambhuva Manu is doing his duty in protecting his Manvantara? After all, Swayambhuva Manu is the first Manu of the first Manvantara, right? And we are in the seventh Manvantara. So who is going to remind us who is the Manu of the seventh Manvantara and what is the name of this Manvantara? So who is going to answer that question? What is this Manvantara called?
Madhuji, I say it is Vaivasvata Manvantara.
Vaivasvata Manvantara.
Okay, very good. So two answers. There was anybody else who wanted to come in? I heard a male voice. Let's get a male also to answer. Okay.
Suresh, I just said Vaivasvata Manvantara.
Very good. Fantastic. So, Vaivasvata Manvantara. Seventh Manvantara is Vaivasvata Manvantara. The Manu is called Vaivasvata. So, the Swayambhuva Manu is first Manvantara. So, we need to understand in what spirit Swayambhuva Manu is doing his duty in protecting his Manvantara. And that is where the second verse comes in. Kuruvanneve iha kuru karmani jijiji vishet shatang samaha evam tvayi na anyat eto asti na karma lipyate nare. Okay, two lines of profound philosophy of karma. Okay, Kuruvanneve iha kuru karmani jijiji vishet shatang samaha evam tvayi na anyat eto asti na karma lipyate nare. So let us think about this. Okay, so before even we understand the gravity of what Swayambhuva Manu has told us, I've got a slide here actually reminding us what is karma, what are the fundamentals of karma, because every opportunity that we get in this satsang, we need to start thinking about the basics. Go back to our basics and understand what is karma. So I'm going to pause there for a minute and get folks to contribute what they understand by the term karma that is so colloquially and commonly used in Sanatana Dharma. So who wants to take that up, please?
Madhuji, it is the action that we do, the various activities that we do in our daily life.
Thank you, Padmajaji. Pragnesh?
Similar answer, but perhaps in the spiritual context, with the right attitude and with the righteousness.
Okay, thank you, Pragnesh. Great answer. Anybody else wants to contribute here?
Anything which is in thought, word, and action
Fantastic. Thank
generates
you,
karma.
Padmajaji. Yeah, anything that is in thought, word, or action is karma. Beautiful. So thank you very much for all those contributions. So the fundamentals of karma. So let us look at from a very common root. Karma comes from the root kru. Kru means act, action, performance. So that we understand, okay, from one level. So what I want to do is go a little bit deeper about what this karma actually means, okay. So here is a box, something for us to think about. What is karma? It is a very nebulous thing, isn't it? Okay, we do this action. Is that what is karma all about, or is it something else? So our acharyas have been thinking about this problem very, very carefully as to what this karma is. And they have come to the conclusion that karma is a metaphysical category. That is, it actually exists. So that is the first point. First, we have to accept that it actually exists, because there are not many philosophies and religions out there that actually accept karma as a concept. It's a very Sanatana Dharma or the subcontinent context of karma. Of course, there are other religions that may consider it in one form or the other, but our rishis have dissected this in great detail. Okay, so karma is a metaphysical category. It actually exists. It is actually a padartha. Yeah. Prameyatvam pramanasya padarthasya lakshanam, as it's called. So that which is seeing, or that we can know through true knowledge. Any entity or any category that we can understand through true knowledge is a padartha. So our acharyas think that karma actually exists, that it is real. It actually exists. It is not an illusion. So that is the first thing that we have to understand, and that it is actually perceived in true knowledge. Okay. So when true knowledge means what? So I am giving the satsang, we are all discussing, we are all having a very interactive session, you are all contributing, talking, and so on. So this action is going on, right? So it is seen in action. So it is a real entity. So that is the first concept. We have to understand that karma is not an illusion. It has actually got a reality, and it is something that exists. Okay. Next is the bigger question, okay, which sometimes we may not think about this deeply. Who is the doer? If we think there is act, there is action, there is performance, and so on, then the question is, who is actually the doer? Is it this hand that is moving, or is it just my vocal cords that are just moving up and down and creating vibrations in air, which is perceived as sound? Who is the doer? Okay, so I'm going to break there for a minute and get us all to think about, what do we think about this idea of who is the doer? Because then the question of karma, karmic imprints, and stuff like that come in, isn't it? So what are the views here? Who is the doer? Pragnesh.
So the easiest way, as we learned in our school days, the figure of speech, direct, indirect. I am eating apple, apple is eaten by me. So if I convert my day-to-day action that I am operating, or operation is being performed by me, but it is directed by God, then I do not incur the karmic imprint, if I am correct. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Pragnesh. Deval.
I think it is the jiva that is doing.
So you feel it is the jiva that is the doer. Okay. Anybody else has got a slightly different view on this? What if I just become a charvaka, a materialist, a hardcore scientist who just thinks it's the brain-mind complex that actually does activity? Would you disagree with me, or what is the view here? Okay, so I think Deval has got some key points there. Pragnesh has also got some key points. So what my humble request here is, when we talk about karma, first we have to understand karma is a real entity. Next, we have to be convinced that who is the doer. If an action is being done, somebody is performing that action. So who is the performer of the action is the next level of philosophical questioning. Okay, so I've given you various views that exist out there. Okay, so let's look at the Buddhist view. Souls, God, do not exist. And actions are momentary and through the skandhas. Okay, so that is the view. Even the karmas are momentary and do not have a reality of their own. Buddhist view. Let us look at what the Advaita school, the monastic school of philosophy, tells us about karma. Okay, brain-mind complex, also called the mind stuff, also called antakarana, whose reality is sadasat vilakshana, is the doer. Okay, think about this. So, antakarana, or the brain-mind complex, which has got a third level of reality called sadasat vilakshana or mithya or unreality, is the doer. The underlying consciousness is not the doer. Okay, is the monastic view. Look at Jain philosophy or Visishtadvaita or Dvaita philosophy. What do they say? They say there is this something called the self, and that is also, we call it as jiva. And then there is the supreme self or the supreme soul. So there are two different entities. Me as a soul is occupying the sadhana sharira. So it is the soul which is the sentient being here, and that is what is doing the actions. Okay, so that is the Jain Dvaita, Visishta Dvaita philosophy. And then, of course, I told you about the materialists, the Charvaka, the neurobiologists, the neuroscientists, the scientists who think it is the brain-mind complex, which is real, made of matter, but that is what does the action. There is nothing called the soul. Okay? So these are the spectrum of views as to who is the doer. Okay, so I think it's an interesting idea to explore and see what appeals to us. Okay, so here, Harish, yes.
Yeah, just not to confuse, but is na aham karta hari karta, is that not in this context?
Absolutely, it's in this context, Harish. So if you could, I've got slides coming up as we go along to understand what is that concept of na hari, na aham karta, hari hi karta, in what perspective we need to look at this. So if you could bear with me for a few minutes, we'll handle that. So let us look at the first one. I don't think I should spend time talking about this because everything is momentary and everything is illusory. Okay, so let us look at the monastic view. Antakarana is the doer. Okay, so let us look at our Kataka Upanishad, right? So this particular analogy or metaphor. So who is going to remind us in this equation? Who is who in this equation? This body has been compared to this chariot, right? So who wants to remind us in this audio, in this group, as to what is it that Yama has said in this particular metaphor? So who wants to take this up?
I'm telling.
Yeah, Pragnesh, yeah, go for it.
So the 5 horses are the 5 karmendriyas. Then the rein is the mind, the charioteer is the intellect, and the passenger is us.
Brilliant, Pragnesh. Thank you so much. So if you take this, what Yama has taught Nachiketa and through Nachiketa to all of us, that is very clear that Antakarana or the brain-mind complex is actually this rein and the charioteer. Okay, so this rein is the mind. Yeah, that we have no confusion here from what Yama has taught us. So here is a bigger question. So hold on to the idea that this is this rein that is made of matter. That is the mind. Okay, the mind complex, Antakarana, is made of matter. Okay, so one view is it is the matter that is the doer. Okay? Look at the Jain philosophy, Dvaita and Visishta Dvaita schools of Vedanta. They have come up with the conclusion that it is a sentient being that can do any action. What kind of action? Conscious action. So this is important. Conscious action. We'll say what that means. So as you know, Veda Vyasa has composed this very important sutra in the second adhyaya. Rachana anupapatteshta na anumanam. Pravriteshta. So these are all key important sutras. The first sutra, I'll just give you an overview. What Vyasa says in this sutra is, he's talking about doership, and he says, only sentient beings can have the capacity for self-initiated action. Yeah. So the capacity for self-initiated action can happen only in a sentient being or a conscious being. A jada such as a stone or a sand or whatever cannot have a capacity for a self-initiated action. A stone cannot become a vigraha. You need to have a sculpture who has to make it. A sand cannot become a pot. You need a potter who is a sentient being who needs to make it. So the jadas cannot have a capacity for self-initiated action, whereas it is the jiva, which is a sentient entity that can have the capacity for some kind of self-initiated action, not just the jiva, but any sentient being has the capacity for self-initiated action, because it is that sentient being which is doing an act or an action or a performance. That sentient being may be using a medium. That medium may be our mind, it may be our tongue and vocal cords, or it could be our hands. The sentient being is using these instruments to do various actions, which we call as karma. Yeah, so think about that a bit more. So I come back to our Shvetashvatara Upanishad, where we have only three entities in all of existence. You have Brahman, you have Jiva, and you have Jada or matter. So in this equation, what are the sentient beings? Who wants to quickly answer that? So what are the sentient beings in this equation? So Brahman and Jiva, Veena ji, go for it.
Yeah, Brahman and Jiva are the sentient beings.
Thank you very much. So Brahman and Jiva are the sentient beings in this equation. So therefore, based on what Veda Vyasa has reminded us, Rachana Anupapatteshtana Anumanam Om, we can understand that Jiva and Brahman have a capacity for some type of self-initiated, planned, predetermined action. Okay, that is what becomes karma. Yeah, in the core sense. Whereas a jada like the stone or a sand has no capacity for self-initiated, planned, predetermined action. Okay, so I hope you are able to get around that idea as to why it is important in certain schools of Vedanta to actually attribute the doership to a sentient being, because it is only a sentient being that is capable of a self-initiated action. Mind complex is actually made up of matter, and it cannot do self-initiated action. Okay, think about that a bit more. Okay, so that is what is, now you can understand where I am taking you here. So what I am telling you here is, in the first level of looking at this, kuruvanneve iha kuru karmani, first we understand jiva is a doer. Okay, it is the soul that directs the intellect then to the mind then to all the sense organs. Exactly what Prajnesh ji has just reminded us of, that metaphor of Katha Upanishad. Okay, Jiva is the doer. So that is, we understand from the scriptures. By pratyaksha, by direct perception, like how we are doing this satsang, we are all perceiving each other online, doing various activities. So that also tells us that there are sentient beings who are doing this. You are perceiving even talk, and I am doing this. You are listening to it. We are having a conversation, etc. So we also understand it is only a sentient being that actually does a voluntary action. Inference, even inference also we understand that it is only the sentient being which is the doer. Okay, so inference, as you know, is anumana. And here is what I've told you. There are only three modes of knowledge of everything. So karma, essentially, we can't directly see karma, right? None of us can touch karma. So in that sense, the super sensory things can be understood only through the Shastras or Apaurushaya Agama. And we just did Katha Upanishad, which is part of the Krishna Yajur Veda, which is Apaurushaya. So from that Apaurushaya, we understood that Jiva is a doer. And then, of course, you have Pratyaksha and Anumana, which have a role to play to understand karma. We understood by Pratyaksha. What is Anumana? Yatra chetanatvam tatra kartrutvam. Yatra achetanatvam tatra kartrutva abhavaha. So this is what is basic logic. So wherever there is sentiency, there is doership. Where there is no sentiency, there is no doership. Okay. So I hope you are convinced that it is the jiva who is the doer, not the mind stuff. Okay. So what does this jiva do? As Manjari ji just reminded us, it does few things. What does it do? It thinks, and then it speaks, and it does various actions. So all these things that we do with our karma indriyas become the actions, which in a very superficial sense, we say is karma. But here is a twist. Unless the origin of action and the scope of soul's jurisdiction to action is properly understood and digested, karma yoga prescribed in the Gita can never be understood. Okay, so I'm going to invite one of you to recite this most famous verse, which we will be going back and forth throughout the rest of the talk. So who is going to do 247, please? Volunteer. Yeah, Sheila ji, go for it.
कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भूः मा ते संगोऽस्त्व अकर्मणि.
Thank you, Sheila ji. Beautiful. So that is a very important verse, and it's very commonly cited. So once we start looking at the philosophy of who is doing the karma, then the first line and the second line of 247 becomes very clear. And hopefully we will navigate this the rest of the talk today, the second half of today's presentation. So the scriptures declare that the jiva is the doer. Na kartrutvam, na karmani, lokasya sujati prabhu. Na karma phala samyogam swabhavastu pravartate. Think about this. And then, of course, Harish ji reminded us of this verse from Gita Tatparya. Na aham karta, harihi karta. Think about this. Okay. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is a long passage that talks about iti, yatakari, yatachakari, and so on. So I'll leave that for now because that is going to distract us for the full discussion. Brahma Sutra, very important. Vyasa, our founding father, has actually done an adhikaranam called Kartrutva Adhikaranam. Yeah, go and dissect, go and read, Google it out and see what Vyasa's view on this is. Jiva as a doer. Karta, Shastra, Arthavat. So the Shastras, the Vedas give, the Vidhi and Nisheda and what the Jivas should do and so on and so forth. So that is all some of the evidence to say that Jiva is the doer. But then, of course, the question is Jiva the independent doer? From all the things that we have understood so far, we realize that Jiva is not an independent doer. That is the primary position of Vedanta. Jivas are not independent doers. So this takes us to this idea of Bimba Pratibimba Bhava that we have discussed a number of times. So let us remind ourselves as to what this is. So who is going to explain to us what is the Bimba Pratibimba Bhava as described in the Rig Veda? Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Babuvaha Tadasya Rupam Pratichakshanaya Indro Maya Bihi Purarupa Iyate Yukta Hiyasya Harayaha Shata Dasha. So who is going to remind us of Bimba Pratibimba? What is the relationship between Brahman and Jiva?
Madhuji Suresha,
Yeah.
it perhaps describes the dependency of the soul on the Bimbarupi Paramatma. So, like, unless the initiator of the act, while the action is being done, but the image by itself cannot be doing any action. It's only doing, it's only being a representative of the action that's initiated by the object in this context.
Yeah, thank you, Suresh. So the Bimba is Paramatma, Pratibimba is the Jivatma. So whatever the Paramatma does, the Jivatma does, in the sense that giving the idea of dependence. So not to be taken literally, I just want to remind this. Some folks think that this mirror is the Upadhi, and if you destroy the mirror, the image is gone. Therefore, all that remains is the object. That is not the object of Rig Veda mantra Rupam Rupam. It is to bring about this Bimba Pratibimba position between Jiva and Brahman. So that is an important idea here. So we understand that this Jiva is entirely dependent on the Supreme Paramatma for everything, including its ability to act and do everything. Yeah, this is like, again, we have to go back to our sutra, Yatacha Taksha Ubayata. Taksha means a carpenter. So a skilled carpenter working for an employer is, of course, an agent with the means at his disposal. So this carpenter is able to do stuff. But at the same time, he is doing some furniture because he is being directed to do something from his employer. So that is that Kartrutva, or the doership of Jivas also. And the Jivas are also doing it that way. So Yatacha Taksha Ubayata. So we understand in the Vedic times they were carpenters. That is also another way of looking at it. Okay. So we carry on. We are building up this plot about what this karma actually is. So we understood it is about the doership of the jiva, and that does various actions using this karma indriya. So that we outwardly call as karma. But actually it is about the doership of the jiva. And we understood that the jiva is a doer, but he is also a non-doer in the sense he is not an independent doer. In that perspective, he is a non-doer because he is not an independent doer. He is a dependent doer. Okay. Now, here is the core idea of what Svayambu Manu is telling and what the whole Bhagavad Gita is all about. And we know that there's so much of discussion, right, in all the chapters. So what that is about, when we forget that we are dependent doers, then we incur karmic imprints. Okay, so that is the core philosophy. Karma is all well good, but there is the bigger problem called the karmic imprints. Yeah. So who wants to tackle this one? What are karmic imprints and where do they happen and why do they happen? So we have kind of discussed this on several occasions. So who wants to take this up? Karmic imprints, ignorance, deep memory of the souls. Where are they placed and how does it operate? Any quick, yeah, Deval.
Yeah, I mean, it's there in the figure, isn't it? They are on the linga sharira. So in your analogy of when the jiva removes one set of clothes, like a body which takes on another body, the imprints on the linga sharira will remain, and then they will manifest in a rectangular box. So there are 3 different types of karma.
Brilliant, brilliant, fantastic. So excellent answer, Deval. So the karmic imprints. So when do they happen? The karmic imprints happen only when we forget that we are dependent doers and we take independence of action. That is the rules that Paramatma has laid for the law of karma. When we think we are independent doers, if you do something that way, there is a karmic imprint. That imprint goes on to your linga sharira. These are the yellow dots of the karmic imprints. The linga sharira, don't forget about linga sharira. It is always with us. Yeah, Yama talks about this, if you can remember that verse. So this linga sharira is always with you until you shed that linga sharira and go to moksha. Until then, it is always with you. And that linga sharira is subtle matter. That is where all these imprints are. The various imprints, karmic imprints, deep memory of previous lives, and then your ignorance, the primordial cosmic ignorance is also there in linga sharira. Yeah. So as I said, karmic imprints happen only when we perform actions thinking we are independent doers. Okay. And here are some, tidbit points here. That concept as I am doing, I am independently doing happens only when we are adults, when we are able to use our intellect. Yeah, your intellect is very mature only at the age of 14. So our Vedic Rishis are super intelligent. They put this rule saying that only from the age of 14 to 80 years, you are eligible to have karmic imprints. Before 14, no karmic imprints, whatever you do. After 80, there is no karmic imprints, whatever you do. You're excused. It's only from 14 to 18. Human form of life is where the karmic imprints happens. Okay. It takes 10 future births for individuals to work out the amount of karma accumulated by him or her from the 14th year of life. So these are all, basic ideas that I just wanted to revise today. 14 to 18, human form of life, one life birth leads to 10 future births. And all the imprints are happening in linga sharira. So when you look at this, the bag of karma that we have accumulated in innumerable previous life is immeasurable. Okay. So how can we possibly remove all the karmas to achieve a state where there is no rebirth? It is a big problem. Think about this. So for those people who think that karma yoga alone is liberating, I have to burst that bubble because it's not going to happen. Yeah. Just doing karma yoga alone is a step. It is the first basic step, but it is not going to be liberating because we have accumulated so much in all our previous birth. Yeah. So it is with these ideas that Svayambu Manu is thinking about this verse. Svayambu Manu needs to act to defend himself or seek protection. If this incurs karmic reactions, should he act or not? If God is an independent doer, should Svayambu or Manu leave everything to God? Yeah, so this is where we have to, as I said, get into Svayambu or Manu with regards to how he is doing in the specific context in which this mantra has been seen by Svayambu or Manu. And of course, in this box, you have all the various definitions of karma, which you can do your readings. There are so many types of karmas that are described: sanchita karma, kriyamana karma, prarabdha karma, niyata karma, naimittika karma, prayashchitta karma, etc., etc. So all those things you can read, but these are the core ideas is what I want to deal with today. Okay, so now the plot about karma gets a little bit more interesting, because that is the beauty of Isha Upanishad. When you look at kuruvanneva iha kuru karmani, then you think about it in various perspectives. So far, we have looked at karma with the root word kru, to work or to do some action. Okay, but here is a perspective that Svayambu Manu is coming from. His etymology of karma also includes another etymology of karma: kara and ma. Kara and ma becomes karma. Kara in Sanskrit means tax. Yeah, it is basically tax. Yeah, excise duty, if you like. Kara means tax. Ma means manam, means knowledge. Being aware that you have to pay the tax. Okay, that is also is called karma. So karma equals karma. Swayambhu Manu is also thinking like this. Yeah, what he's thinking is, I have to pay tax because I am living in this universe. I'm looking after this manmantra, which actually is owned by somebody else who has given me all these facilities, and I have to pay some tax because I don't own anything. As a gratitude, I have to pay some tax. Okay, so if you look at it that way, karma gives you interesting ideas. Okay, so in fact, when you look at Vedic scriptures, karma and dharma, they are kind of interchangeable in scriptures. Karma is also dharma, dharma is also karma. Dharma, as you know, is righteousness, duty, etc. Karma is also your duty. It can be tax, it can be excise duty, or your duty. Okay, so if you look at it from this perspective, this is what Svayambhu Manu is doing. He's saying, Kuruvanne eva iha karmani. Okay, so what does that mean? Kuruvan, easy. Karmani, we have understood all the karmas, what karma actually means. Iha eva karmani kurvan. Okay, so Svayambhu Manu is saying, Iha eva karmani kurvan. So we'll have to think about what that Iha actually means. So this is again, as I said, is the beauty of Isha Upanishad, to actually think about what does Iha actually means. Iha can be so many things in Sanskrit, okay? It can be in this place, here, in this place, in this world, now, or when I have this sadhana sharira, is all some ideas of Iha. So in this place on earth, in this jagas, now using my sadhana body, do some karma. That is one view. That is a very superficial view of looking at it. But Iha, primarily in Vedic philosophy, means entirely different things. And I just want to remind you here, Katha Upanishad, Manasaiva idam aptavyam neha nanasti kinchana. Look at that verse, na iha nana asti kinchana. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad also has a similar verse. Manasaiva anudrashtavyam neha nanasti kinchana. Na iha. So you will see all these verses in various Upanishads, including Isha Upanishad, where it says Kuruvanneva iha. Okay. So in a deep philosophical meaning, Iha denotes the Paramatma. Okay. So what is happening here? Swayambhu Manu is seeing Yagnanamaka Paramatma in front of him. So he is saying, I am going to do all these actions as a duty, as a submission to you. Yeah, that is the meaning of Iha there. I am whatever action, you have made me the ruler of this Manvantara, and the Asuras are attacking me, and I need to defend this, and I will do whatever that I have to do as a submission to you who is in front of me. Okay, Iha, something that is close, now, here. Yeah, so that is the ideas of Iha. If we just take Iha as this place, this world, now this body, it's all well and good. But that is not what Karma Yoga is, right? Karma Yoga is submission to the Supreme is what Karma Yoga is. And that is what this thingy, Kanva Rishi is seeing this very, very carefully. Watch those words. And again, we should never get ourselves distracted by that. We should look at this with great care. Kuruvanne Iha, eva iha. Eva means you have to. It stresses. There is no other way. Whatever karma you do, you have to do to Iha. Iha eva karmani kuruvan. To the Lord, as a sacrifice to the Lord. Okay. Anybody familiar with Bhagavatam 11th Skanda, 2nd Adhyaya, 36th verse? Anybody wants to recite this because that captures exactly the same. Pragnesh, go for it.
Kayena vacha manashendriyarva buddhyatmana va kurudavat karoti yat satalam parasmai narayati samarpaye bhatat.
Beautiful, Pragnesh. Thank you so much. Narayana e iti samarpaye tat. So that submission to the Supreme, yeah, that is the Iha there. Same ideas captured by Bhagavatam. So now in Katha Upanishad, we were doing, whenever there was a verse in Katha Upanishad, we were looking at the verses in Gita. The beauty of Isha Upanishad is we should look at Bhagavatam and also Gita, so we get lots of ideas from that. Look at another verse from Bhagavatam. We are very familiar with this. 2:10-12. Dravyam karmashta kalashta swabhavo jiva evacha yad anugrahataha santi nasanti yadupekshaha dravyam karma. All these are always dependent on the Paramatma. Yeah. And of course, in Purusha Shukta, we did this verse. Remember, go back to the Purusha Sukta where it says Saptasyasan Paridayaha Tri Shapta Samidaha Krutaha. So this body with 7 various things is given as a submission, a total surrender to the Supreme. Yeah. So now who wants to do 18:5 and we can get another friend to do 3:30. So who wants to do 18:05, please?
Yeah, I'll go.
Yeah, Vinaji.
Yajnadana tapah karma natyajam karma eva chat. Sorry, natyajam karyameva tat. Yajnodanam tapaschaiva pavanani manishinam.
Thank you, Vinaji. Beautiful. So what are the karmas that the jivas do? Krishna said 3. Yajna, dana, and tapaha. These are all the karmas that needs to be done as a dedication to the Supreme. Yeah. So 3:30, who wants to take that up? That is also a beautiful verse of Gita that talks. Of course, I have to put a rider here. There are so many verses in Gita that talk about karma. I was actually struggling to pick and choose, and I just picked a few verses from Gita that is kind of relevant to what the discussions that we are having today. So 3:30, who wants to take this up?
I can go, Mazin. Mai sarvani karmani sanyasyadhyatma chetasa nirashir nirmamo bhutva yudhyasva vigadachvaraha.
Beautiful, Hari. So mai sarvani karmani samyamya. So dedicate everything to me. Okay. Then the 247, of course, becomes relevant when we understand this philosophy. Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. There ma means no. Ma is one meaning of ma is no. Yeah. So ma has got different meanings in Sanskrit, as you know. Ma means no. Karmanyeva adhikaraste. Your jurisdiction of things is to just to do a bit of doing. Yeah. That is a dependent doing. Whereas the fruits of what you have done is not in your jurisdiction, it is in my jurisdiction, says Krishna. So once you understand that, then that becomes proper karma yoga. Okay. So here I thought I'll do so many verses today, so it's not going to be possible. Maybe another 5-10 minutes and we'll close. So at this juncture, it probably becomes relevant to think about what is the role of karma and what is the role of jnana in our progress to salvation. Because there are various views within the Vedanta schools. There are various views. Some say karma is important and not jnana. And some would say jnana is primarily important and karma can be left off after we get jnana. Okay. So do we have any ideas here? So who wants to come here? So I've got a few MCQs. Karma is not required for liberation. Knowledge alone is required for liberation. Karma with knowledge is essential for liberation. Those are the 3 MCQs I've got here. So anybody wants to take on and come up with a pragmatic view of us, how do we take this? Because Svayambu Manu is also talking about that.
Madhu Suresh, maybe I could try.
Yeah.
Perhaps the last one. I mean, we need to do karma to obtain the right knowledge, and the right knowledge will help us to do the right karmas. So karma without knowledge is meaningless, and just having knowledge and not doing any karma also doesn't yield any result.
Beautiful, Suresh. Anybody else has another view? Okay, if not, then I'll go. I absolutely agree with you. Again, the evidence for all that comes from our Upanishads, which we should never forget. We should not make our own. That is what I keep coming back. Let us not make our own airy-fairy philosophy and dismiss karma altogether and say only jnana. Even to acquire jnana, as Suresh ji said, you need to do karma. You have to go to school. You have to walk. You have to carry a bag and go and listen. All these are karmas. And then once you get knowledge, then you do karma properly. Yadeva vidyaya karoti shraddaya upanishadaha tadeva viravattaram bhavati. Okay, Chandogya Upanishad. Yadeva vidyaya karoti. Yeah, that is what is called jnanottara karma. Yeah. So that is the key concept. The whole idea of understanding karma and jnana is not to say that karma is useless and should not be done. Some schools think that way. But the key is yadeva vidyaya karoti. You have to do it with jnanottara karma. What is that jnana? Which is what we have done so far about dependent doership. Jiva is the doership. That is the first jnana. Jiva is the doership. Second jnana is Jiva is a dependent doer. Is the second knowledge. These are all fundamentals that we need to understand. That is why in the last verse of Purusha Shukla, look at this. Yagnena yagnyam ayajanta devaha. Tani dharmani pratamanyasan. Yagnena. So if you look at this, I've told you this before, that yagna could be considered as this yagna, namaka paramatma of Isha Upanishad. Yagnena yagnyam ayajanta. Yagna means yaja deva pujayam, yata sangati karane. So there are various etymology for yagna. It is not just throwing stuff into fire. It means so many other things. Yagna dane, yagna sangati karane, yagna deva pujayam. So those are all the ideas. So an act of surrender to God. Worship and surrender to the Supreme is the very first and the most important ordinance or the dharma for all jivas. Tani dharmani pratamanyasan. Okay. So as I said before, dharma and karma can be interchangeable. So if you do that, that approach to karma is the very first and the most important that you can do as a jiva. So now the question here, of course, is you could then argue there could be another view as, do the jivas do karmas, jnanottara karma only up to the point of liberation, or in the career of souls whilst they are in samsara, and at the same time when they are in moksha, are they always doing some action? Is there a situation where, say, for example, when the jivas jump over to the trans-material plane, that they will not be doing any moksha, any action? So who wants to take this one? So there's an interesting idea. Forget about folks who think that there is no moksha at all. We are not talking with them. We are talking about folks who actually think that there is a moksha. So when there is moksha, do the jivas do any actions there or not? Who wants to take up? Suresh?
They logically should continue to do actions. They cannot be a state of suspended animation is pralaya, right? Fundamentally. So that when they move, I mean, even in moksha, they are, praising the God. They are trying to understand, because only to one's maximum capacity. So that only gets realized there. So I don't think there is an instance where there is no action as such.
Yeah, wonderful, Suresh. Spot on, because there are certain schools of thought which think that moksha is a state of absolute stillness, of absolute emptiness and stillness where there is nothing. Okay, so there are those kind of schools. So we need to be mindful of those views, because 3.5, who wants to take up this 3.5 verse, which is very important because Krishna has said that. So who wants to take that? No problem, I'll do that. So, nahi kaschid kshanamapi jatu tishtati akarmakrit. Okay, Krishna, I said, there can never be a point where jivas can't do action. Okay, some of our friends in other schools have conveniently forgotten this verse, 3:5. Nahi kaschid kshanamapi jatu tishtati akarmakrit. There is never a point where the jivas are not doing any action. Of course, we are doing all sorts of actions in samsara. It is only that 99.99% of us are doing sakamya karma and hence stuck in this samsara. If only we do jnanottara karma, we at least have a hope that we might get ourselves out of this mesh. Yeah. Look at in moksha sthiti. Chandogya Upanishad actually talks about what happens in moksha. And as Sureshji was saying, even in moksha, jivas are doing action. Okay. Satatra, pariyeti, chakshan, kridan, ramamanaha, stri birva, yoni birva, nyati birva, and so on. And Chandogya talks about what the jivas do in the state of moksha, where chakshan, kridan, ramamanaha, they are doing all sorts of actions. Stri birva, they are meeting their wives of the previous births. Yoni Birva, they're interacting with them, they're doing all sorts of interaction. Nyati Birva, they're also meeting those jivas whom they have met in so many other previous lives who have attained moksha, and they're sitting there in heaven, in moksha. They're meeting them and having conversation. And of course, there is Chaturmukha Brahma, who is all, there are of course so many Chaturmukha Brahmas there. And the Chaturmukha Brahmas they're all reading the Vedas, and all these moksha jivas are also listening to Vedas, they are discussing Brahma Sutra, they're doing all sorts of philosophy, and they are playing around. Yeah, that is what Chandogya Upanishad says. So, Kanda.
Sorry, just a doubt, Madhu. You said the jivas are going to continue to do the karmas even in moksha. Does that mean, are they going to accumulate the karmic imprints?
Yeah, good point, Kanda. So the karma there means action. Yeah, so that action there, they don't have a linga sharira in moksha, okay? And in moksha sthiti, they are always doing nishkama karma, jnanottara karma of shastra abhyasa and thinking about the supreme. So there is no scope of any karmic imprints there. Yeah, so because they don't have any material linga sharira at all, and their approach to action is entirely different. Yeah. And that is what we need to understand. So, Kanda, you brought it up at a perfect timing, because in Gita 4:9, so in Gita 4:9, so can I ask one of you to recite this? This is a very important verse, 4:9, because it is not only the jivas who are doing action. Gita says even God is doing action all the time. Yeah, so who wants to take that? Avinaji, go for it.
Janma karma cha me divyam Janma karma cha me divyam yo veti tatvatah tektva deham punarjanma naiti mameti sorjuna.
Beautiful, Veenaji. So, Janma karma cha me divyam. Krishna says in 3:4:9, in 4:9, he who knows my birth and the type of actions that I do. Karma. Yeah, so look at that, Kanda, where even Krishna says, I am also doing action. What are my actions? Janmadhyasya yataha. I am doing action of creatorship, maintenance, sustenance, giving moksha to all the jivas. I am doing so many work. But my action is that I am not attached to anything. I just do it because I have to do it. And I'm not attached to the fruits. I don't expect anything, but I do it. So look, if I can do like this, you can also do like that. So be inspired from me is what that idea of 4:9 is. So even in Bhagavanta himself is doing actions. Jiva is also doing actions. So the idea there is doership is only in sentient beings. And they are all doing actions, but it is a question of in what perspective they are doing the actions that leads to karmic imprints. Okay, so this is where we are at this point. So I thought I will do a lot of stuff today, but I think we have to stop there because there are lots of ideas that we've discussed already. Yeah, so I will take this verse next week. It's another beautiful verse. So he says, Kuruvanne ve iha karmani. And where do? You do this work as a sacrifice to the Bhagavanta. But how do you do it? Jijiji vishet shatang samaha Evam tvayi na anyadeto asti na karma lipyate nare. So as how Kanda was talking and Veenaji was reciting here, in this verse, Svayambu or Manu is saying, in what way you do, then you don't have karmic imprints. So what we have done so far is, we have kind of done the preamble or the introduction to the next 2/3 of the second verse. Okay, so there are some beautiful ideas that are there in these verses. So what we will do is we'll take it up next week. So I think we went on quite a lot discussing about karma today. So I thought it was a good forum for us to revise karma. And I also had some messages to me saying that we should do Isha Upanishad in a very, very gradual, slow way. Let's not rush from one verse to another verse just because we have to finish a mantra. So I think what would be helpful for all of us is to do this manana about what is it that Svayambu or Manu is saying, what is it that Bhagavatam is saying, what is it that the Gita is saying, bring in the sutras where it is important, and bring in other Upanishads so that we understand what kind of karma that Svayambu or Manu is doing, so that we can also follow his footsteps. Okay, so we'll carry on with this in the next class. And on that note, I'm going to finish today. And if there are any questions, we'll take it up. Right. Nice one. So, Harish.
Yeah, Madhuji, just one question. So, Jagatyam Jagata, can we, I think you covered it last time and maybe a little bit this time also. Can we just maybe go over the significance of that, those two words?
Yeah, so here, so you have Ishavasyam idang sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. Okay, so there the literal is, so the way you have to look at it, Harish, is think about jagatyam and jagat. So you got jagati. Yeah, the jagatyam is a combination of two words, jagati and yam. That becomes jagatyam. So you got jagati there and jagat. So yam means from this jagati comes this jagat. That is how you read it. Jagatiyam Jagat. So the Jagati is what? It's a Strilinga. It is a feminine gender word, Jagati. And Jagati means Prakriti. Prakriti means Mula Prakriti, the primordial matter that was there before the Big Bang. Okay. Inside Bhagavanta's tummy. And of course, Nasadiya Sukta, as you know, talks about this. So that primordial matter is what is called Jagati. And whatever this world, yet kincha, whatever this jagat that you say, yet kincha jagat has come from this jagati. Yeah, so that is how you read it. So the idea there is that this Bhagavanta is there everywhere. And then you understand, then there is this jagati or the matter. Then there are these jivas. And then there is this Paramatma. The ideas of Nya, Agnya, and Deva. Of course, you can take that Prakriti as Chit Prakriti or Achetana Prakriti. Achetana Prakriti is Mula Prakriti, then you have Chit Prakriti is the Shri Tattva. So the idea there is this Paramatma has pervaded everything. Even for Shri Tattva, Paramatma has pervaded Shri Tattva and given her the capacity to do all sorts of things. That is why in Sutra, even the Shri Tattva is called Samana, right? There is a Sutra, there's Samana, Sruti Pakram. So that's different. So even Samana is pervaded by Paramatma. That is why we always, whenever we say Narayana, there is always Lakshmi, the Lakshmi Narayana, Radha Krishna, all those names, they come from those kind of philosophy. So I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Jagati and Jagat.
Thank you.
Madhu, Suresh, just
Yes,
one
Suresh.
quick question. Maybe, I mean, we did this while doing chapter 4 in Bhagavad Gita in 433, when Krishna says, Shreyan, Dravyam, Jnana, Yagna, I mean, all of these, he says that Sarvam Karma Khilam Partha Jnane Parisamapyate. Now, does that lead to, how is that best understood in the fact that if everything is going to end up only in Jnana, then only Jnana matters. And therefore, Karma, perhaps, is that the root for confusion? How does one understand that in the context of what we discussed today?
Yeah, very important and complicated question, Suresh. I think different acharyas have a different view on this. Some schools actually think that as a grihastha, okay, as you and me, who are going through this samsara, and we are in the grihastha ashrama, where we are doing not only looking after families, but are also hopefully contributing to the society and doing all sorts of stuff. So there are some schools that actually say that grihasthas, brahmacharya, grihastha and vanaprastha ashramas cannot give you liberation. That sannyasa ashrama is the only route to liberation. Okay, so I'm not going to name which school that is, but actually there are schools of Vedanta that describe this, that only if you're a sannyasi you can actually get moksha. Okay. Who is a sannyasi? Who has left all the karma yogas and he does not do anything. All that he does is knowledge and contemplation of knowledge. What is that knowledge? That is not for today's discussion, but the knowledge. Just meditate on that knowledge and suddenly liberation dawns one day. If you are a grihastha or a vanaprastha, you do not stand a chance of actually getting liberation. So such schools have put a preeminent role for jnana alone is liberating. Okay. Then, of course, you have the Purva Mimamsikas. The Purva Mimamsika school is an entirely other spectrum. They said, no knowledge, gilage and all that. Sit around the fire, throw stuff. You will go to heaven, enjoy, and then come back again. That is all is the whole activity. So there is the karma on the other extreme, where karma alone is liberating in the sense that it takes them to Swarga and then brings them back. Okay, so that is the extreme view on the left, and then you have the extreme view on the right. But there are other schools of Vedanta which actually says everybody, every sattvika soul is eligible for moksha, no matter what their varna is, no matter what their ashrama is. Okay. Everybody is eligible for liberation. And how do you do that liberation? Jnanottara karma. You do action, gain knowledge. And then, as you said, once you gain the right knowledge, you do the action. So coming back to your verse, your question, Suresh, that is the preamble to that. The answer there is, if you do Jnanottara karma, so what will happen Jnanottara karma? When you do Jnanottara karma, you will actually join the satsangs, you will do Shastra Abhyasa. When you do that, what will happen? Atmavare drashtavya, shrotavyo, mantavyo, nitidhyasitavya. You will do shrotavya, mantavya and nitidhyasitavya. When you do that, what will have? You will have jnana. What type of jnana? Aparoksha jnana. And when you have the aparoksha jnana, then you reach liberation. So that state of aparoksha jnana, there are so many ways of looking at it in Gita. For example, jnana agnihi basmasat kurute. So there is also that verse, right, in Gita. What is that jnana? Aparoksha jnana. When you reach that aparoksha jnana, then with the God's grace, all your karmic imprints go away. So that is what Krishna says there. So this mutual exclusion of karma and jnana, they are two separate entities and then do not go with each other. They are two opposite poles. May be acceptable to certain schools of Vedanta, but there are other schools which kind of don't agree to that idea. That will make that, then the problem there is, if you just say jnana alone is liberating, then you restrict that liberation only to a very few. The sannyasis alone are eligible for liberation, but that is very difficult. You and me can't become sannyasis, and also it is very restrictive. Whereas there are other schools, for example, the school of Srimad Acharya is extremely democratic, and we will say that anybody is eligible for moksha as long as they do jnanottara karma as the first step, and then do shravana, manana, nididhyasana, aparoksha jnana, and then moksha. I hope that answers your question, but it's a very complicated question. Kanda.
No, I was just going to ask you, what is the role of bhakti and surrendering yourself in all these things? Where does that fit in? Is it in the karma or, in the jnanottara route? Or
beautiful question, Kanda, because it is that surrender which is bhakti.
Yeah.
So that is the surrender is bhakti and nothing else. Yeah. And that surrender should come with the right attitude and an aptitude. Yeah. And that is where that bhakti comes from. And of course, there are classic definitions of bhakti also that we have done, as you know, in many classes. What is that bhakti? What does that surrender actually be? What is the quality of that surrender? Just going to a temple and then doing some archana is surrender and bhakti? Shastras have categorically said no. With a big capital no, they have said. And there is a classic definition, Kandar, for that, where the Jayatirtha in Nyaya Sudha actually gives a definition. He says, Parameshwara Bhaktir Nama Niravadika Ananta Anavadya Kalyana Gunatva Jnana Purvakaha Swatma Atmiya Samasta Vastubhyo Api Ananta Gunadiko Antaraya Sahasrena Apratibaddaha Nirantara Prema Pravaha. So what that means is that bhakti should be far higher than the bhakti as the love of God should be far higher than the love of yourself as a jiva, the love of your family, the love of all the properties. That love we all have, and that love to God should be the highest. That happens only when you surrender in the right jnanottara, in the right knowledge when you surrender. And what is that right knowledge? That he is Gunapurna and Doshadura, he is Gunapurna, he is an abode of infinite auspicious attributes. How do I know that? Ishavasyam idang sarvam, that he is the one that is brought. So once you understand all this, then you understand how big this fellow is and how small I am. And then you surrender and you have that love to somebody who is so far above you. That is what is the proper definition of bhakti. 100% not going to the temple and doing archana. We may do it in the right spirit, but mechanically doing it is not bhakti. This is what the Shastras tell us. So your beautiful question, Kanda. Surrender is bhakti, and the surrender comes only when we have knowledge. Surrender is a type of love. Yeah. Excellent, guys. So if there are no further questions, thank you very much for joining today. So we carry on with our journey of the second verse. So we still got 2/3 to cover. And then the third verse is even beautiful, because then Svayambu or Manu says, those fellows who are not doing jnanottara karma, what happens to them? Asurya namate lokaha andena. That's a beautiful verse that we need to be very careful. So hopefully we'll touch that verse next week, but I'm not sure with the details in which we are doing Isha Upanishad. Okay, so on that note, Krishna Pranamastu, take care. We'll catch up next Sunday. Hare Krishna. Harish, before we finish, we need your Om recitation.
Sure.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna. See you next week.
Guru Bhyo Namaha. Thank you.
Thanks, Madhu. Bye.